Given the season that the Predators have had, did you really think the Canadiens would have trouble with them? Well, I think after the first period of play, everybody was doubting what the Habs could do tonight. No energy, no pushback, no nothing. But they come out of Smashville with a 2-1 victory anyway. Time to drop the puck on another edition of Montreal Hockey Talk. Hey everybody, Costa here with another edition of Montreal Hockey Talk. And before I get started, I just want to address something that I know a lot of you already know, and you engage with me on social media, and there's no animosity between us. But I'm going to say this because it really bothers me, and that's for the keyboard warriors out there who come out and say something stupid like, oh, just talking for nothing. Do you know the concept of what a podcast is? It's me putting my opinion out there for you to be able to come back and actually have a discussion. Think about it. Maybe bring a couple of ideas to the table, exchange opinions. That's why we do what we do. We put the content out there so we can have something to talk about, think about, and do for the next day. But no, I get the one guy who comes out and says, oh, you're talking just to talk. Wow. Dude, if you weren't in your pajamas in your mom's basement, I would feel sorry for you if you were an adult. But still, you're not, so I don't care. And if you're watching, you know exactly who I'm talking about. I'm not going to name names, but we could stop all this garbage and get back to what's really important. And what is that? The Montreal Canadiens coming away with a 2-1 win in Smashville tonight. And you know what? Nobody thought the Canadiens would win tonight, including myself. Yes, I said it in the opening that we thought the Canadiens wouldn't have trouble, but we knew they would. They looked tired on Saturday night. They looked even more tired tonight. And proof of that is the fact that David Savard was kept out of the lineup in exchange for Arbor Xhekaj coming back in, who had sat out the last 3 games because he was playing very poorly defensively. Tonight, you saw an Arbor Xhekaj much more responsible in his own zone, not chasing the puck or chasing the play, letting it come to him and playing a very good defensive game. But we'll get to all that in a minute. Early on, Steven Stamkos scores, and, everybody's sitting there going, oh no, Jakub Dobeš let in a weak goal. There goes the hockey game. The Canadiens are just going to implode. That didn't happen. There was a second goal that was scored that was disallowed off the stick of former Habs first overall pick Michael McCarron. And when that goal went in, everybody was like, okay, now the game's over. But now that goal got disallowed, and with very good reason. The reasoning is this, is that the player came into the crease, okay, and made contact as he was leaving the crease with the goaltender. Now, you've heard the rules state that if the goaltender is outside the white paint, there's no goaltender interference. But by the same token, that doesn't mean if the goalie's standing outside the white paint that you could just bump into him whenever the hell you want. If it's initiated because the defender's pushing you in, it's a completely different story. But what happened, I forget what the guy's name was. I think it was Bloomberg or Blundberg or something to that effect. He bumped into Dobeš's knee. And now Dobeš was down in the butterfly, feet in the crease, knees out. So there was an argument that could have been made. But at the end of the day, he skated through the crease and made contact on the way out with Dobeš, spinning him a little bit and allowing McCarron to put the puck into an empty cage. No goal. And it took me a little bit of time to figure out the interpretation of the rule, but looking at the NHL rule book, it seemed pretty cut and dry after the fact. And so the Habs ended up being down just 1. Cue up the second period. What happens? Cole Caulfield scores, making it a 1-1 hockey game. And then cue up Patrick Laine, scoring at even strength, something he doesn't do very often, but a beautiful snipe fed by Lane Hutson to make it 2-1, and then the Canadiens are holding on for dear life. Shot totals in this game, 37-17 in favor of the Nashville Predators. So you got to give some credit to Jakub Dobeš, despite the fact that the Predators did hit 3 goalposts. The Canadiens, on the other hand, hit a couple of goalposts on their own. So that point, completely moot, off the table. At the end of the day, what happened was the Canadiens ended up gutting out a 2-1 win over the Predators. And the Predators didn't look good all game long. Yes, they got 37 shots on goal, but if you take a look at who got those shots, Stamkos got a couple. But they have players like Ryan O'Reilly, who really wasn't mentioned all that often during the hockey game. Philip Forsberg was in there. In fact, Philip Forsberg decided it was a good idea to hit Lane Hutson high with an elbow for no apparent reason. He did a drive-by, nailed him, and you can find that video on Reddit if you look at the Habs Reddit. It's on there, so please go and do that. Thanks to HFTV for that one. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is that the Canadiens just continued to push, and they worked, and they worked, and they worked. And they limited the amount of mistakes they made. Sure, I think, what was the giveaways tonight? 17-13. So relatively even when you look at it from a global perspective. But again, we saw it during the hockey game. Yulia Savkovsky and in the neutral zone making a flat pass across, getting intercepted. Those passes have to stop. We already mentioned that. But at the end of the day, the Canadiens gutted it out. The Canadiens are now 6 points in front of, as I take a look at the standings, in front of the Rangers and the Detroit Red Wings, who they play on Tuesday, and we'll talk about that in a minute. They're now 8 points ahead of the Islanders, and they've effectively eliminated the Pittsburgh Penguins from playoff contention. So now there's 3 teams that are absolutely eliminated from the playoffs, and that is the Boston Bruins, Philadelphia Flyers, and now the Pittsburgh Penguins. The only reason the Sabres aren't yet is because they still have a couple of games in hand, but with a loss or 2 or a Canadiens win, that could very well be the end of the Sabres season as well. But nobody expects the Sabres to really surge all that much, given the talent that they have on that team. But the talent that the Nashville Predators had, I mean, they got a lot from their secondary players because, you know, they were missing Jonathan Marchessault, Colton Sissons was out, Roman Yossi's out, he's week to week. So there was a lot of good players missing. So I'm not surprised that the Canadiens came away with a win. I'm surprised at how tired they were. And, you know, they took out David Savard, which is fine, but, you know, you could have pulled back on a couple of guys as well. And you did have, like, Mike Pizzetta, who was relatively fresh, despite the fact that he got into a fight, got his ass handed to him. You could have played him a little bit more. You could have given a little bit of a break to Yoel Armia. You know, play Heineman a little bit more. Oliver Kapanen is relatively fresh. He could have played. You could have even inserted Joshua Roy into the lineup for one game just to give your team a little bit more energy. So there were things the Canadiens could have done. And, of course, Josh Anderson, who didn't play yesterday, was with the team tonight. So you did have some fresh players out there. You had to give those guys that played last night a little bit less ice time, but that didn't happen. Marty St. Louis still leaning on his top players to be his top players. They did produce, so there's no argument there. But a lot of times in games like this, you need to peel back a little bit on those minutes. But you know what? It is a playoff race. You can't fault them for it. You can't blame them for it. The Canadiens came away with 2 points, so obviously let's move on and let's take a look at what's coming up for the Canadiens. But as we do that, one of the things I wanted to bring up is another slow start by the Canadiens. And tonight, the slow start was a byproduct of their lack of energy. It goes without saying that they just had no legs. 17 total shots over 60 minutes. I mean, you do the math, okay? It's not even, 6 shots a period? I mean, that's disgusting. I don't care what team you are. You can get more than that. But a lot of that stems from the fact that the Montreal Canadiens try too much to get the perfect shot. If you watch other teams that play against the Habs, even teams that play in back-to-backs, the one thing that teams do is they pepper goaltenders with shots. And the Canadiens didn't do that. They decided to, I'm going to thread the needle a little bit. You saw that in the third when Alex Newhook passed the puck into the slot looking for a shot from there when he had a very good look at UC Saros. So there's a lot of plays that players make, and this, again, comes down to fatigue. There's a lot of plays that they make that they normally wouldn't because, oh, hell, you know what? We're not tired. We can chase the puck down. We can get to it first, whatever the case may be. Tonight, they were being a little bit too tight on their sticks. And that almost cost them on multiple occasions. Again, Jakub Dobeš was a little shaky at the beginning, but as the game progressed, you could see that his game got better and better. And that also is a byproduct of what I talk about a lot, is the fact that I thought Sam Montembeault, after the Four Nations Cup, was being played too much. You got to give Dobeš a little bit more ice time. He's played a couple of games in the last 10. You know, he's looked pretty good later in the hockey game. Early on, though, because of the fact that he hasn't played, and he's a young kid, you can't really fault him for it. You could see that he's a little nervous. He's swimming a little bit in his crease. So, you know, if you want Dobeš to be an effective backup, you got to make sure you give him enough time on ice so that he can build his confidence, say to himself, you know what, I'm good enough to be here. And if you think about it, the kid came out from the American Hockey League and went 5-0. So you know he's capable of having good performances. It's just a question of, you know what, When he came up from the AHL, they were kind of playing him 1-1, and then it was 1-2-3-1. And so that messes with the goaltender's mind. I don't care what you might think. If a goalie doesn't play, he's always thinking why. Whether he plays well in his performance or whether he does poorly, there's always a why. There's always something that a goaltender can do better. And the minute you get into a goalie's head, it messes with him. So you've got a goaltender whose mind was messed with, and you have a team that was absolutely sucking on dirty pond water, like Pierre Maguire likes to say. What happened? They gutted it out. So this is by definition what a character victory looks like. They willed themselves to win tonight. This is a team that wants to be in the playoffs. Not for any other reason that they believe they deserve to be there. And for that is why they won tonight. There's no other reasoning behind it. You can put up any strategy you want. You could talk about any mistakes they made. When a team is tired and they win a hockey game, the only thing you could go out there and say is that it was a gut check and they came through it with flying colors. But the Canadiens have to be careful moving forward. This back-to-back at this time of the year can be extremely detrimental to a team. It's a little bit of a mind fuck, as it were, because these guys are going to be tired going into Tuesday's game. Tomorrow, don't expect them to skate. It's going to be optional. You're not going to see very many players on the ice. Maybe you'll see a Caden Gooley. I doubt that very much. Maybe you'll see Josh Anderson a little bit because he didn't play on Saturday. I doubt that as well. You may very well just give him the day off and then come in for the morning skate on Tuesday. But at the end of the day, the Canadiens didn't deserve this win, but their heart got them through it. And for that, you got to give the players all kinds of credit. Now, moving forward, now is the time that we talked about. I've been talking about for weeks now, David Savard getting a rest. He got it tonight. And that's a good thing for the Montreal Canadiens. He needs that rest. He's somebody that they lean on a lot, especially in the defensive zone, to make the right reads and really be a leader for the young defense corps. By the same token, when you look at a guy like Yoel Armia, right? Yoel is playing with a bad wrist right now. And he's really not effective. The fact that he cannot stick handle, it shows that he's having issues playing out there, right? He's not as aggressive along the boards to get the pucks. He's still skating to the pucks with relatively good speed, but when he gets there, you could see he's pulling back a little bit because he's worried about getting too injured. And that's why I'm saying you can give a guy like Oliver Kapanen a little bit more ice time, who's looked very good, by the way, in his 2 games this past weekend. Or, you can insert Joshua Roy into the lineup, who, as you know from the World Junior Hockey Championship, has a propensity to play defensive hockey when he's asked to. Okay? He was outstanding in the World Juniors for Canada when they lost 1 gold. So you know that you can count on Joshua Roy to kill penalties. So if that's the case, and you have somebody like that out there, you've also got Michael Pezzetta, who can just put himself in front of shots, okay? And you can give him a little bit of extra ice time to try to insulate Roy a little bit. You have options. And it's important to rest your best players. Armia, despite the fact that he's not producing offensively like a crazy man year after year, his contributions this year, along with Jake Evans, have been paramount to the ability of the Canadiens to be where they are right now in the playoffs. And, with everything that the first line has done, with as good as the second line is starting to look now that they've inserted Emil Heineman in that slot with Kirby Dach's injury, as good as the third line has looked all season long, that fourth line is going to be really important, and it needs to provide energy. And right now, it doesn't have any because Armia has to pull back a little bit. So instead of having that fourth line there limping along, for lack of a better term, why not put in a Joshua Roy? Hell, why not, when you bring David Savard into the lineup, put Arbor Xhekaj in that forward position to give Armia a break? I mean, if you want to play the defensive game, who better to kill penalties than another defenseman who can actually move around? And given the fact that that Arbor Xhekaj likes to chase the puck a little bit, maybe, just maybe, that might be the choice that you want to make, to get him into the lineup, pull Armia out, and let him get a rest as well, just like you did with Savard. I mean, those are things that the Canadiens have to look at. It's really important. And so, going into Tuesday's game, I think that Marty St. Louis has a lot of soul searching to do and a lot of questions he needs to answer. And in talking about that, let's take a very hard look at this massive matchup against the Detroit Red Wings on Tuesday. A win by the Montreal Canadiens will all but eliminate the Red Wings from playoff contention. And that's huge for the Canadiens. You haven't heard that word said in the last 4 years. So we know that they control their own destiny. We know that with continually winning, they'll be able to move forward and gain more and more success and clinch that playoff spot ahead of the end of the season, right? And now, what are the keys to them doing that? Well, again, we talked about resting players that need to be rested so that they're fresh. So take Yoel Armia out, put in somebody who's a little bit more fresh, do what I just talked about, and you may have a little bit better success. And you know what? You limit those minutes anyway to 8 to 10 for that line anyway, game in, game out. So you're not really changing anything as far as the fourth line is concerned, but you are giving Armia a chance to back off a little bit, nurse that wrist, and maybe, just maybe, have him come back a little bit fresher and feeling a little bit better. But when you look at the Detroit Red Wings, what are the strategies to be able to get a win over Detroit? Well, number one of the guys that always kills the Canadiens every time we play them is Alex DeBrincat. You cannot allow Alex DeBrincat to beat you again. I mean, DeBrincat has been outstanding for the Red Wings this year, especially recently in their wins. So you need to make sure that DeBrincat is not a factor. And the same holds true for Dylan Larkin. Larkin, very dangerous out there, very capable to destroy the Canadiens with a good game like he's done in the past. So those two guys are really what you have to look at as far as limiting offensive opportunities. You limit those two guys, and at the end of the day, you end up winning hockey games more often than not. Of course, you have to score. So another point is to be able to exploit Detroit's goaltending. And now you can expect Cam Talbot to play against the Canadiens on Tuesday night. And Talbot is a good, capable goaltender, but if there's one knock on him, is that he's inconsistent. It's kind of why the Edmonton Oilers got rid of him. He's good some nights, and other nights he's absolutely putrid. So how do you get in his head? Well, you put traffic in front. So it's a big game for guys like Juraj Slafkovsky, Brendan Gallagher, Josh Anderson, and those big boys that get in front of the net to create havoc in front of the goaltender. You got to get people in his eyes. You got to make sure you get pucks on net, and you got to take advantage of rebounds because Cam Talbot gives up rebounds all the time. So if you do those three things, you'll probably end up having a little bit more success than normal. The other thing you got to take advantage of, and the other thing you got to do very well against Detroit, is force them to take penalties because their penalty kill is not very good. It's among the lowest in the National Hockey League. And so if you can get power play time, and the Canadiens with guys like Laine, Caulfield, Suzuki, and Hudson can pull the trigger at any given time and score goals on the power play in bunches. So if you get those special teams opportunities and you have Detroit's penalty kill on the ice, you can score goals if you do things right. And again, it comes down to, you've got those four guys out there that I just mentioned in Laine, Hudson, Suzuki, and Caulfield. And then you take a Slafkovsky and you put him in front of the net to create havoc in front of the goaltender. Boom, there's your formula to scoring on the power play. Very easy, very simple. And lately the Canadiens have gotten away from playing a 1-3-1 where they've got somebody in the bumper, and they've been playing more of an umbrella where they've got somebody at the net front. So if that's what they're going to do, then it's the perfect opportunity for guys like Anderson and Brendan Gallagher to be able to get in front of the net, wreak havoc, and allow the Canadiens to get shots on goal and rebound opportunities. You got to make sure you play better defensively. You got to play strong, and you got to maintain your defensive structure. And that means, like Jack I did tonight, don't chase the puck. Let the game come to you. Make sure you keep a good gap. Make sure you defend your own zone well. Make good passes out of your own zone. Don't always rely on flipping the puck out. And when you attack Detroit off the rush, they're vulnerable because their defense is not very mobile. So make sure that you keep that defensive structure intact. The forwards have to support the D. The D have to get the puck up to the forwards quickly and then out of the zone with speed. And the last thing, and the thing I just mentioned, is that you need to get depth scoring. So the second, third, and fourth lines need to contribute. The fourth, maybe not so much because they get limited ice time, but the second and third do. And that's something the Canadiens have gotten of late. We can't argue the point. Brendan Gallagher getting his 20th goal, In his last 11 games, Christian Dvorak has 10 points. Josh Anderson has contributed here and there. Alex Newhook can contribute. So can Patrick Laine. He did that tonight. So there's a lot of that scoring that you can get from lines 2 and 3 to relieve some of the pressure from line 1, because they're going to be the guys that get all the attention on Tuesday night. That's going to happen with Detroit, and they're going to be on him like white on rice. So those 5 keys are going to be the way the Montreal Canadiens are going to win that hockey game. Make sure you neutralize DeBrincat and Dylan Larkin. You get into Cam Talbot's kitchen and you make his life difficult. You take advantage of your power plays. You make sure that you maintain your defensive structure, and above all else, you capitalize on your depth scoring, and you make sure your second, third, and even your fourth line try to contribute something. And you do that, you're going to be able to beat them, because like Montreal, Detroit doesn't have very much depth. So therein lies the way the Canadiens can beat Detroit on Tuesday. And it's going to be a game we're all going to be watching, because everybody's anxious to see Detroit get eliminated by the Habs. Will they? The Canadiens have struggled against Detroit this season, so who knows? But right now, the Canadiens are riding a 5-game heater. They're going to take a break tomorrow. Tomorrow they're going to be refreshed on Tuesday. You're going to see a different team and the need to get out to a fast start against Detroit. They can't sit back and have Detroit attack them nonstop like Nashville did tonight. It's not going to work for them. You can't get behind the 8 ball against the Red Wings. If you play against the Red Wings with the lead, you are in a much better position to win the hockey game, because Detroit cannot play with the lead. From behind. They have a hard time doing it. So get the lead early, take care of the 5 steps that we outlined, and you're going to be able to win the hockey game on Tuesday. Now, one last thing, and I mentioned it earlier, and that's what Philip Forsberg did to Lane Hudson. The drive-by where he hit him with an elbow up high and knocked him to the ice. Luckily, Hudson was fine. But again, it's another one of those things that we talked about. And I mentioned it yesterday with the referees missing stuff. You saw Alex Newhook with an open net have his stick absolutely cleaved in front of the net. I love that word, cleaved. It reminds me of my dad with a cleaver, right? Because my dad was a butcher. But anyway, I digress. He had his stick absolutely obliterated at the side of the goal, and no penalty was called. This is crunch time for you guys as referees, right? This is the time of year where, ever since the trade deadline came and went, like Marty St. Louis said, this is playoff hockey for every team that's looking to aspire to make it to the Stanley Cup playoffs, okay? So the referees have to be as much at their best as the players do. And we haven't seen that, right? It's been difficult to watch these games because you're not getting good officiating. And this goes for both sides. I'm not saying it because they do it to Montreal. There's calls that they let go that Montreal has as well. Tonight they made a couple of chintzy calls, especially, where you see players chicken winging the stick. If a player is going to drop his arm on a stick, I'm sorry. If you're going to call a hook, call the embellishment. And again, it goes both ways, because nobody plays hockey with their arms in like this. You have your stick, your armpits are out, right? Your arms are out. The only time you actually have them tight is when you're turning. And even then, one of them's out. You've always got an elbow out. Like they say, elbows up, right? So I want to see the referees do better. For the Canadiens anyway, there's 5 games left in the regular season. In those 5 games, I'd like to see the officiating be better. Even in the other games that I watch, and I watch a lot of them, the officiating just has to be a better caliber. Gone are the days of the Tim Peels of the world, or, Bill McCreary, Andy Van Hellemond. The list goes on and on of quality referees that are retired. Kerry Fraser. Now, you've got young referees out there who are still learning. The elder statesman of the referees is Wes McCauley. And we know Wes McCauley's a quality referee, but he can't be at every Canadiens game. He can't be at everybody's game. He's going to get spread out as the playoffs go around. So you've got to trust the younger referees. Tonight we saw Ghislain Hebert is refereeing his last regular season game, and after the season's done, he's retiring. How long is Wes going to be around? I don't know. So there's a lot that has to be said about the referees in the National Hockey League. The young guys just have to keep up. and they have to learn their craft quickly. It's unfair, but it's a truth. It can't be slow to them. They have to pick up the game quick, and they have to make calls and stand by them, even if they make a mistake, and learn from those mistakes, just like players do on the ice. It's the same thing. But we want to see better officiating. Better to err on the side of caution and make the calls when they're there than to let them go and look like you have egg on your face. That's the way Stephen Walkom has been telling the officials to act, but it's not the way they're acting. Instead, they're letting things go, and it's starting to cause ripples in the National Hockey League. So we need to get better officiating. So that's what I want to see moving forward, starting with tomorrow night's slate of games. Let's see better officiating. Let the teams be on an even playing field, and let's get to the playoffs. 5 game left for Montreal, an important one on Tuesday. We'll all be watching. We'll see you then, folks. Go Habs, go.